Welcome to this week's episode of Inside the Headset presented by CoachComm. This week, we hear from Tyler Osborne, the wide receivers coach at Stanford, as he shares his lifelong passion for football, the value that connections have on getting future jobs, and quickly adapting to and learning about Stanford football. But first, a word from CoachComm.
Deuce left, check with me. If they're in quarters match, we're going to Pittsburgh or Ohio.
They're in zero.
Let's go. Hippo, Seattle, wide choice. If we call the protection right, it's 6.
When a play call is the difference between winning and losing, your headset choice could be your most important decision. When the call counts, CoachComm is the only choice for clear, dependable communication. Visit CoachComm.com for more info.
We got it, guys. Good job.
Now, let's get inside the headset with Coach Osborne. Coach, what's going on, man? How are you?
I'm doing good. How are you doing?
I'm doing good, man. It's good to see you. I know you were part of that 35 under 35 classes last year, but you just, man, had so much stuff going on at that time, which we will talk about towards the end of this podcast here, that I didn't get to meet you face to face, man. But it's good to kind of at the very least see you here over this video deal, and super excited about diving in this thing with you.
Yeah, same here. Yeah, appreciate you having me on.
No doubt, man. Well, the legendary Tom Osborne, I know there's two of them that exist, right? The Nebraska coach, and then your father, who was floated especially on the West Coast and in that Pac-10. I guess he might know it as the Pac-12, right? Or whatever pack it was. He was probably part of all of it. Coach Tom Osborne was just absolute legend there on that West Coast. You grew up in that household. When did you decide you wanted to be a ball coach, and how much influence did your dad's career have on maybe even teetering back and forth on that decision?
Yeah, I knew at a really early age that I wanted to be a coach, and a lot of that was sparked because of my dad.
Yeah.
I was one of those coaches' kids that was always trying to be at every practice I could or sit on any meeting I could of his, and he actually had a former player that came back one time to a practice. And kind of saw, he'd been removed a few years from my dad. I kind of coached him, and I saw him on the sidelines, and he had recognized me, and he basically had told me, like, hey, if it wasn't for your dad, I don't know if I would have, had the same experience in college in a positive way.
Yeah.
And kind of went more into depth on that, and basically that kind of right then and there, that moment kind of showed me, like, wow, my dad, to me, he's a pretty cool guy, but he's able to have that type of impact on people, in a very kind of critical age,
right,
with their development of life, and I've always been really fascinated with the X's and O's, the technique of the game, and all the different positions. And so, kind of those two things, my, kind of love for football, and then also seeing the impact that you can have on people by being a coach, from a very early age, kind of was what kind of was like, all right, I think that's something that I definitely want to go pursue myself. And so, never really wanted to do anything else besides coach football.
That's awesome, man. I've had a few guys on that kind of had similar situations. Their dad was a legendary high school coach or collegiate coach or whatever. And I automatically assume everybody's story would be a little bit more like you, and most of a little bit more than what you would think were like, man, I would watch my dad, getting after kids at practice, or, the hours, or, job transitions, and, getting let go and getting hired. And sometimes that at least push guys away a little bit, but you never kind of teetered off that line. You always wanted to do it, huh?
Always wanted to do it. Yeah. And, I got a chance, like you said, my dad, was very fortunate in his career to coach at some really good places. And I got a chance to watch some really elite players, kind of all growing up play. And there was a part of me too that was like, you know what? Like, I don't know if I'm quite like that guy, like that player.
Right.
And so I go, if I want to stay in football as long as I can, it might not be playing in the NFL for X amount of years. It might be trying to find a different way to stay involved in this game. And so, I was a pretty realistic kid, a little bit from that standpoint or I knew, coaching would be my most likely path to stay in this for as long as I could. And I guess I've never really thought about doing anything different.
Yeah. So you get hit the ground running, man. Like you said, you always knew you wanted to do it. So you kind of got the leg up a little bit because you pretty much were an undergrad coach, a student assistant, and you were able to kind of be around that Oregon program in that role from 11 to 2015. And so right now, I mean, you're kicking this thing off from 18 to 22, 23 years old. You're getting a ton of experience. First and foremost, how did you kick the door down and, number one, get that opportunity? I mean, because I mean, I coached at the FBS level, honestly, any of these levels, and a lot of students come over and like, hey, man, I want to coach. And you're like, no, you don't, bro. Get out of here. And, it doesn't always work out for all those kids that come in and initially, try that deal out. How did you kick down the door? And then how did your perspective change transitioning from player to coach?
Yeah. To start that with, I really I approached Chip Kelly I basically reached out to him and sent him an email and said, I would really love to meet with you sometime if I could to talk about maybe kind of getting a position on your staff as, basically a volunteer, undergrad assistant. And my dad, actually going back to my dad, he played 1 year at Washington State, had a kind of a career-ending injury. Okay. And then the next 3 years was an undergrad assistant at Washington State. And so that's kind of how he got his foot in the door and kind of, started getting into coaching. And, I kind of knew that would be an avenue for me too, as well, that could kind of help me learn a lot of football at a really early age.
Yeah.
And a lot of, kind of be a fly on the wall and get a lot of, be able to observe and learn a lot, but then also get a little bit of experience, as time went on, and hopefully I earned the trust from some coaches to get some more experience. And I just felt that was a really good way to kind of kickstart my career, even at an earlier age. And, my dad was on that Oregon staff at the time. And so I did have a little prior, relationship with Chip Kelly. And so I reached out to him, and, he got back to me and said, how about this day and this time? And I went in there and got all dressed up, brought some stuff, and, just got a chance to talk with him a little bit. And, he talked to me for, it's probably 30, 45 minutes. And, and basically got back to me with, as far as, hey, here's kind of a role that I'm thinking will be good for you. And it really, that role actually was working with Chip specifically my first year.
Oh, wow.
Chip, as the head coach, actually coached our slot receivers.
Okay.
Scott Frost kind of had the outside guys, and Scott was definitely working with all the receivers as well. But I just mean, as far as meetings went, and everything, Chip kind of ran the meetings for kind of our slot receivers / kind of like, some of the guys we put in the backfield, like D'Anthony Thomas and guys like that. So, anyways, he felt that he could use a little bit of help to do that. And, like I said, I interviewed for that, and that's kind of how I got my foot in the door.
That's awesome, man. Now, during that experience, obviously you saw the game prior to, like you said, you're always kind of a football nut and things like that. Getting that exposure. Once again, your dad's a head coach. I mean, your dad's a coach bouncing around all these different universities. So I'm sure you had a ton of exposure to the game. But was there anything groundbreaking, especially, I mean, that was at the time, that's the offense that everybody was trying to figure out. That was the tempo that everybody wanted to know about, the two-point conversion philosophy. I mean, there was a lot going on at Oregon that everybody was super interested in. What was that learning curve for you getting in that environment and being like, oh, dang, yeah, I thought I knew the game, but I'm obviously you're always a sponge. I'm sure you're still learning to this day, but what was it like just really switching gears and learning that ball?
Yeah, I'd say, I learned probably more football, or I know for a fact I learned more football in my first 18 days there than I did probably my first 18 years of life.
Yeah.
Just observing and, being in meetings and listening and, here and there trying to ask some questions, especially to some guys that had been there for a while in that system, and ask some questions. And I would sit in meetings and kind of write down questions a lot, because obviously I didn't want to interrupt the meeting and ask a question. So I would do that kind of frequently to kind of learn some good stuff. But what I'd say, I learned a lot about how how much detail really matters in your scheme and technique and coaching and all that. But I also learned a lot just from observing coaches running meetings and watching them run drills on the field, and kind of what that took, both from a command presence, how to be prepared, how to teach, how to simplify, just how to, some guys learn different ways, right? How they would break it down. And I would say in those two areas was probably where I learned the most, was just the amount of detail that it takes to, to be great from every position on the field, right?
Yeah.
And then just also kind of, how to coach. And so that experience was invaluable for me. And it was a really good thing, I think, at that age to see and observe from, like you said, some really good coaches and a program that had been doing really well at that time.
Yeah, and from a familiarity standpoint, obviously the longer a guy spends on staff, a lot of times often more likely to get promoted or more likely to get a little bit more responsibility. During that undergrad, that student assistant time frame, did any of your responsibilities grow before you got the offensive analyst job, but did anything grow from 11 to 15?
Yeah, I would say, especially in the first 6 months, like I wasn't doing nearly the amount of stuff that I was doing later on.
Yeah.
And I think that there's a little bit of like you're trying to learn,
Right.
Even how to do certain things, whether it be on the computer or different other avenues that you can help out. And I think the coaching staff's trying to see if they can trust you to do that.
No question.
And so as time went on, I got definitely a chance to expand my role. And, it happened pretty quick, I would say, even because Chip, after my first year, went to the NFL. He went to go coach for the Eagles.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
And so there was a good amount of support staff, even like a lot of the GAs and quality control guys that went with him to the NFL. And, I was still in school. So I was still there, and there was a little bit of turnover, not as much from the coaching staff, like the full-time coaches, but a lot of support staff. And so, kind of during that time, I was able to do a lot of things that I think that some of those guys had done previously, and kind of step in and help out in those areas, and then even kind of help be a bridge with some of the guys that they ended up bringing in. And just through that, I gained a lot more, one, experience, but then two, just kind of responsibility, I'd say, for the next 3 years of my undergrad kind of career. So,
and then so you're able to kind of take that, all the experience that you got, and then you graduate, and then you get this offense analyst opportunity there in 2016. What was the biggest, jump in responsibility and probably change going from student assistant to getting this this new role?
Yeah, to be honest, and I think maybe why I was, considered and eventually hired for that role as an offensive analyst is I don't think my role even really changed that much, to be honest. I think it was. Don't get me wrong, I was able to be there now full time, but I tried to carve out. I mean, when I wasn't in class, I was trying to do everything I could to be in the facility and help out in any way I could, and take any job that I could. And what I learned, I would say pretty quickly when I first started as an undergrad is no matter what role, responsibility, I was kind of given, or like job task I was given, I could learn something from it. Yeah. And so, for instance, one of the first things they tasked me with was kind of, was in that kind of period of time where a lot of things are going more digital, like with even like the playbook and stuff. And so I drew up all the plays on a new software program that we had, and I got to truly learn every detail and every play, that we were running and why we were doing it, because I was typing in the rules and the notes and all that, and so I got a chance to learn a lot during that time and gain a lot of job responsibility as an undergrad. I would say, especially my last 3 years, I transitioned to work with the quarterbacks. Those last 3 years of my undergrad, where that first year I was with the slot receivers, like I said, and so. When I became an offensive analyst, I was still working with the quarterbacks. So not a lot changed. Like I said, I was there a little bit more because I no longer had to go to class. Yeah. But at the end of the day, from a responsibility standpoint, it didn't change a whole bunch.
Yeah. So when we do the podcast, we're always trying to find little nuggets that guys can take away that might be in kind of any point of their career. And I think about it, I don't think I've ever really pressed for nuggets as an undergraduate. Now you had this awesome experience where you from the time you got there almost to the time or literally to the time you left, you were an undergrad coach. And from an 18 to 23-year-old college student that the other 99% of those guys on campus, I assume, were partying and learning and enjoying that college experience. Did you ever have any time, as you're juggling, trying to make sure you're taking care of your academic side of things, and then this humongous role that, is college football as we know it, where it's crazy hours and crazy effort that you got to throw into it? Did you miss out on? Clearly, you missed out on some of your typical college experience, but were you able to kind of be a college student at all? In the traditional sense.
Definitely looking back on it. And I did have one coach mention it to me kind of my senior year of college. He was like, "Hey man, you do a great job, and you're helping us out a ton. Just like go, make sure you're taking some time away from here too to enjoy that." And so I would say kind of going into my, my senior year, I kind of took that to heart a little bit and was like, okay, people have noticed that I'm, trying really hard and trying to learn and trying to help out in any way I can. And so, I would say looking back on, my whole college experience, I wish I would have actually had a little bit better balance. I do wish that I would have been a little bit better from that standpoint. I feel like, but everything happens for a reason. And like I said, I spent a lot of time there, and I think that helped me learn a lot, first and foremost. And, And yeah, so it wasn't the typical college experience that I think the normal student has. But.
Yeah, no doubt about it, man. And honestly, I kind of figured that was going to be your answer. I mean, you obviously done a tremendous job in your career, and sometimes there's some sacrifice that's involved to get where you got to be. Now let's talk about you in your kind of tenure there at Oregon, and you get the GA wide receiver position there at Washington. Always interested in just that first gig, especially outside of where you get your first start. Sometimes those first couple of things are hard to get rolling. How did you get in the door with Coach Peterson in that University of Washington program, especially in the kind of crazy time they were playing the college football playoffs around this time? How did that go down for you?
Yeah, I same type of thing. I had a little prior connection to Chris Peterson. My dad had coached with Chris Peterson in the 90s, and I was a really, really young kid.
Yeah.
During their time that they were coaching it, I think probably the last time that I'd been around them was, really at the age of about 6 years old.
Okay.
So I was, I was just a youngster when, they were coaching together, but, I got a hold of Chris Peterson's email, sent him an email, same type of thing.
Yeah.
And, got a chance to talk to him on the phone a little bit. And I had known that their previous GA, Kirby Moore, was going to Fresno State.
Yeah.
As the receiver coach.
Right.
And so I knew the role was coming open. And so I reached out to Chris Peterson. Obviously it was a hectic time for them because they were preparing for the college football playoff. And so I knew it would take a little bit of time for him to get back to me. And, I just appreciated that he did. And I talked to him on the phone, and he was basically like, hey, yeah, we've got a role open, and kind of I can help try and get you in touch with the people that'll really make the decision on that. Because he goes, as the head coach, you're only going to work with me so much. You're really going to be spending a lot of time as a graduate assistant with the receivers. You're going to spend a lot of time with the receiver coach and the offensive coordinator. And so he's like, those are kind of the guys that, you have to interview with and talk to. And he's like, I'll kind of help get you in touch with those guys.
Yeah.
And so, which I thought was great because it truly, I went through the interview process just like a bunch of other guys I know they had kind of looked at for that role. And, I got word that, or I basically got, they gave me a time that I could drive up there, cause I was still in Eugene at the time, that I could drive up there to Seattle and go interview. And so I was there for kind of about kind of a 2-day period. And, just kind of, they asked a bunch of questions, asked a bunch of things about what we did at Oregon and, offensively especially, and just different things like that. And, interviewed, and they got back to me after the game, and, kind of had given me the job opportunity. So, that's kind of what the interview process looked a little bit like. But that's how I got up there.
Did you know the coordinator and receiver coach at that time, or was that actually your first time getting to meet them?
Not at all. Bush Hamden was the receiver coach.
Oh wow, okay.
And and Jonathan Smith, who's now the head coach of Oregon State, he was the offensive coordinator. Didn't know those two guys at all.
Okay.
So, and that's literally who I spent like the entire interview and time with.
Yeah.
A couple other guys on staff. I talked to Coach Peterson for about 10 minutes or so, in his office when I was up there. And, there's a couple other comments here and there, but, the interview was really with Bush Hamden and John Smith, who I didn't know at all. And, like I said, I just, went up there and hung out with them for about 2 days. And, like I said, they were preparing for the playoffs. They were pretty busy.
Right.
So they got after that game, and went from there.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. That's as you're kind of talking through the story a little bit, Kirby Moore, he's a 35 guy, awesome guy. Yeah. He's been a part of our program. So is Bush Hamden as well. So it's just cool kind of seeing, especially in the young parts. I didn't know you guys all had connections. Now that I look at that, that's pretty dope. Now, what were some of your takeaways? So now all of a sudden, it's your first time stepping away from the staff. Obviously, you mentioned it was a little bit of transition in terms of Coach Kelly taking the job with the Eagles, and so some things changed slightly, but you were pretty much like with the same staff for the most part. Now this is the first time getting away, wearing some different colors, all that kind of stuff. What were some takeaways just from your experience as a GA there in regards to running the program offensively? Just anything that was like, man, this was good for me. This was good because it was different.
Yeah, I think getting or going to a new program and being around a new staff and seeing a new offense and all that stuff. I mean, my time at Washington was so was so great. I mean, I can't explain even how much, like, and how important that was to me to do. And basically at the end of the day, what I'd say is I learned a ton during my time there, but Chris Peterson does a better job than anybody I've ever been around in terms of like developing coaches and really having a plan to have guys grow, in terms of how to run a meeting, how to coach, how to teach, how to simplify, how to really connect and care about your players. And I've worked for some unbelievable coaches in those areas as well. Just my time there at Washington was huge in my development in those areas specifically, and I attribute a lot of that to Chris Peterson and the rest of those guys on that staff too that he hired to and had. Were obviously exceptional in those areas as well. That's why he hired them there. And so I learned a ton about football. I learned a ton about X's and O's, a ton about how to game plan, all those things. But I mean, just one quick story. I remember one time Coach Peterson basically was like, "Hey, you're going to have an opportunity right now to kind of do like a mock interview where you can get up in front of the whole staff, present your fundamentals, talk through kind of, how you teach and your teaching progression." And because you're not interviewing for the receiver job, we have a great receiver coach right now. He was like, "Hey, I think this would be a great opportunity for you to do." And he did it. He filmed the whole thing. And then he met on his own time, like literally like a separate time, where he stayed back in the office and met with me literally would play it, pause it, talk to me about something like, "Hey, I really like that," or, "Hey, have you thought about trying to simplify this?" Or, "Hey, what do you think about teaching it like this?" And talk to me for almost 3 hours. We reviewed kind of my 45-minute kind of like fundamental presentation and teaching progression. And those were the type of things that I, from my time at Washington, that was like, wow, I have one of the greatest coaches of all time spending time with a graduate assistant right now. And he doesn't have to do this, but he's just trying to help develop me as a coach. Right. And he did that he did those type of things for everyone in the program. And so I cannot speak highly enough about just my time there and the coaches I was around there on that staff.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. I mean, anytime I hear a story like that, especially when you got one of the busiest people in the state of Washington at that point in time, taking a few hours just to make sure that you're going to be in position to get any job that you want whenever the opportunity arises. You're going to be prepared to walk into an interview, which, you did take an interview in order to get that job, but that was your first one. That was the first one you ever did. And, the next time you were going to do it is going to be probably for significantly amount of more money and, a full-time position, all that kind of stuff. So, man, that's huge. And so I appreciate you sharing that story, and I appreciate Coach Peterson for pouring back into this profession like that, because that's what it's all about, man. Now, clearly you were able to learn a lot. You were able to be a fly on the wall and, really learn about running meetings and, doing interviews there as you got to Washington and all the stuff that you learned at Oregon. You get this full-time gig in 2019 with Sac State, right? Once again, I'm going to continue to ask that. How did that come to you? What was your approach? Did you have to interview? All that kind of stuff. And then we'll dive into a little bit about, maybe some of the questions that kind of popped up as you got there.
Yeah. How that came about, I was actually, so basically Coach Taylor got the job at Sacramento State and had tried a little bit to get in contact, hadn't really had much luck. To make a long story, hopefully a little bit shorter, I was at the AFCA convention.
Yes, sir.
Literally on my flight back to Seattle, and I get a call from Bush Hamden literally about 10 minutes before I'm supposed to board my plane back there. And he goes, "Hey, I just talked to Troy Taylor. Sounds like, he'd be interested in interviewing you for the receiver job there at Sacramento State. He's probably going to give you a call here in the next couple of minutes." And literally as he says that, I get a call from a kind of a Sacramento number. And so I pick it up and it's Coach Taylor. And, he asked me a few questions. It's like, "Hey, can you get out here and interview?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I would love to do that." Like, I was trying to do everything I could to try and get my first full-time job. Right. And I was ecstatic about the opportunity to even interview. And he was like, "Hey, can you make it out here tomorrow morning?" Oh, wow. And so he, one of the people at Sacramento State that booked me out on I want to say it was like a 6 a.m. flight.
Yeah.
So I flew back, got into Seattle. I think I got back to my apartment at 1 a.m. or something, grabbed some stuff, headed right back to the airport. flew out to Sacramento. In this whole thing, because I got on this flight right away, like probably 5 minutes after Coach Taylor called me, I was like, I don't know what my connection was. I don't know how I even got on his radar or whatnot.
Yeah.
Anyways, so I'm walking in, or like I'm getting picked up at the Sacramento airport, going to their facility, and I'm thinking the whole ride, I'm like, how did I get this interview or this opportunity? Like, who did I know? Like, I'm it wasn't really public yet who was on his staff.
Yeah.
I was like, I might be walking into a room and maybe there's somebody I know that's in there and happen to bring me up or whatever. And I walk into the interview and I know nobody, literally don't know a soul. And I'm like, all right, I don't know how I got this interview, but here we go. I'll give it my best shot. And so I talked to Coach Taylor about, my coaching philosophy and everything. And I think that aligns really well with his, kind of what I believe in and why I coach and all that. And kind of went through and did a few different things on the interview. But by about 1:30 that afternoon, he'd offered me the job and I accepted it. And then it was after the fact I kind of learned about how I got connected and all that. And basically Coach Taylor had called Chris Peterson, who's a guy that I think Coach Taylor looks as a mentor as well to him and a friend in the profession. They had a kind of a similar Jake Browning played quarterback for Troy Taylor in high school. Okay. Jake Browning ended up going to Washington to play there. And so they had a little bit of a prior connection, and Coach Peterson had helped, I think, Coach Taylor get a job at Eastern Washington, when he kind of made the jump from high school to college. And so they always had a friendship and everything. And so I think he called him and was asking him for some guys that, might be good fits for that receiver role. And so, got the interview and I was like, all right, let's make the most of this thing and see where it leads. So Coach Taylor was very thorough. I found out later, which is good to know, he called Jake Browning, who was a player in Washington while I was a graduate assistant, and had called some other guys in my past. And so he was really thorough. So it was good for me to realize, hey, no matter who it is, treat everybody, the best you can. You never know who it is that might help you get a job.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's a huge takeaway right there. Just you never know who you're interviewing with, who they know. So it's important to have those impactful relationships and be who you are all the time. Now, I do have to ask, you're leaving the convention, you fly over, don't sleep, you don't even have time to really get nervous for this interview because it's just right in your face. Don't have time to really prepare, although I'm assuming you're just already prepared because you were looking for a gig. You grab it, you walk straight onto the flight, interview. I've been on a few of those things, so I'm sure it was a few hours long. When do you go to sleep? When do you actually kind of say, wow, what a day, and just kind of zonk out?
I don't know if it was that night because I was on, I was on cloud nine. I was so fired up to my dream all along, and through those 7 years of being an undergrad or an analyst or being a GA, everything to me was to hopefully get a position job. And
absolutely.
I was really excited about the opportunity to go to Sacramento State. I thought it was an unbelievable conference, a great place that had the potential to win. And so I was pretty excited for a while. So I don't know how well I slept that night. I was so excited, but trust me, the next couple of days I caught up on that sleep.
Yeah, man, that's awesome, man. Well, that's a cool story, man. And I mean, the point that you made is huge, right? You just gotta you gotta have meaningful relationships with people, because you never know if the quarterback is going to be the guy to help you get your next job, or your head ball coach or whatever. Now, your time there, I just raise over real quick. Guys, helped lead the Sac State program to 30-8 record over your time there in 3 seasons. Three Big Sky championships, 3 top 10 finishes, and a 23-1 mark in conference action. Laid down one of the most awesome games I've ever seen in my life. We'll talk about that here in a second. Obviously, I know you weren't on the winning end of that, unfortunately, but I mean, just the competitive edge of that football team was just so cool to see. Anywho, let's talk about that first year there. So now you kind of laid it out here a second ago. You've been in the profession 7 years. I mean, you're a young coach, but you kind of got some experience at this point in time. You've been around the game for 8 years. You kind of got a lot of stuff you maybe have done vicariously through your dad that you've been able to learn from. So, this is this is a big deal, but for you, you're probably a little bit cooler than most people getting their first room. But what were some of the things that, that were not necessarily challenges, but you had to learn as a first year, full-time coach with his own room?
Yeah. I think I tried to take as many opportunities I could along that path, like those 7 years of trying to run as many meetings as I could, in the roles I was in, whether that was, it was often with some young freshmen,
right?
You know what I mean? Maybe coming in and trying to help get them caught up to speed, or running scout team meetings.
Yeah.
Chris Peterson would sit in on my scout team meetings pretty often, and have some critique and stuff like that. So I tried to take as many opportunities I could to run meetings and coach and all that, so that I was prepared for that time, when that did come. And so I'm trying to think of like the main, kind of adjustment to it. I mean, I would say, the meetings often were much longer than the meetings that I would previously hold. So, you just, I think every meeting you have, you almost need, let's say it's a 45-minute meeting, you almost need double the time in terms of preparation for that meeting. So if you're going to meet for 5 minutes, which, it's already kind of a long meeting, my point, from my point of view, just with sometimes how kids' attention spans are and stuff. But if you're going to meet for 5 minutes, you probably need about an hour and a half of prep for that meeting.
Yeah.
And so I would say there was a lot of things from that standpoint that, it was making sure I got the right clips, making sure I got really good examples to teach from. And that was probably the biggest adjustment, I would say, is just making sure I had really, really good content, but it was also simplified and really, kind of clear what I was trying to get accomplished with every coaching point or clip that I was showing. And it was good. It was great. It was great to get that experience.
Yeah, no doubt. And, we've talked obviously a lot about ball and a lot of experience that you were able to kind of garner through being a fly on the wall or, running scout teams, all that kind of stuff, like you mentioned. And one of the things that we haven't really talked about, and probably fewer opportunities for this type of experience, except having guys on campus. But now all of a sudden you're responsible for recruiting. You're responsible for having a philosophy of what kind of kids you want at the receiver position. I'm assuming, just been in some rooms, I know everybody does a little different, but you're probably responsible for one of the final yeses on a receiver that, a coach might have to recruit, to say yes if we're going to offer a kid or not. Having probably a little bit of a lack of that experience, I would imagine, over the course of years, because you just don't get that active opportunity to go and recruit. What were some of the adjustments, learning curves that you had to deal with in that aspect?
Yeah, no, and you kind of already hit on it. That was definitely the thing that, you can prep yourself as much as you want in the recruiting world, but until you can actually get out there, get into high schools, go do in-home visits, be the guy that's now making the final thumbs up or thumb down on whether you want to, go on a kid and offer him a scholarship. All those things were things that, I didn't have a lot of experience in. And so, I would say there was a lot of questions that I asked of people that I really trusted, in terms of how to go about each one of those things that I mentioned, whether it was, building out my schedule for the day on what schools to hit, or even like, for instance, LA County was my, was kind of my recruiting area. So I talked to some guys who were very familiar with LA County about, hey, which way do you want to go because of traffic, right?
Right.
Do you want you want to hit 8 schools today? You probably want to go this way because of traffic, or hey, this school, this coach is going to hold you up for a minute now. He's going to talk a while, but it's going to be really beneficial. Or hey, this coach doesn't talk very long. You probably don't need a plan for as long as a visit. So I tried to just talk to people, that have that experience. And I think like everything, until you go out there and do it, there's always going to be some mistakes you make along the way or things you're trying to learn. And you just try and, realize things that could have gone better. And, every time you go out recruiting or you have a conversation with a kid on the phone or whatever it is, I tried to reflect on, all right, what went well and what could I do a little bit better? And absolutely now I feel, having done it for, a few years now, quite a few years, it's a little bit obviously easier. And I look back at year one, I go, gosh, that probably wasn't the best move in hindsight or whatever. But that's part of it. You got to get experience, you got to learn. And was very, like I said, I leaned on a lot of people, that I trusted that could help me.
Absolutely, man. Yeah. Well, I kind of went over your run there, so we'll fast forward kind of through the seasons. Obviously, you did a tremendous job. You guys threw the ball around a lot. Spent a lot of time in 10, 11 personnel. So your receivers got to do a lot of cool things and have a lot of success. And so, kind of as we get closer and closer to now, into 22, you guys are number 2 in the country, rolling through the playoffs, quarterfinals. You meet Incarnate Word. Once again, I almost can probably say every play that happened in that game because it was legit one of my favorite games. I've watched it a few times since then. But you unfortunately kind of end unceremoniously for you guys. High scoring game, all that kind of stuff. Just talk about that whirlwind of I would imagine the next couple of weeks, right? Obviously, you guys are doing tremendously well. Coach Taylor's probably getting some job opportunities. He hits on one. Where are you at in this whole thing? How does everything go in that kind of whirlwind?
Yeah, that was obviously a very emotional game with how many points there were, and coming so close to getting that victory and everything, and it was a fun game to be a part of. It obviously didn't end up the way we wanted, so there was definitely some emotions from that. That were like, man, like we had this great season, didn't end how we wanted it to, but still kind of reflect on that. And then, like you said, Coach Taylor, the next day was announced he was going to Stanford, and he called me that day and said he wanted to bring me aboard. And anyways, that's kind of that process went. It was a very quick turnaround.
It was a quick turnaround. Okay.
Yeah. It was not long and kind of drawn out. So that was a stressful time, for sure. There was a lot of things going on.
Yeah.
And signing date, the first signing date was just around the corner, and so bunch of things going on. So there wasn't too much time to reflect. I'd say, to be honest, even a little bit after the new year.
Yeah.
With everything. So yeah.
Yeah. So honestly, like sometimes coaches maybe not have in line exactly which guys they're going to take, which guys from the next staff they're going to retain. So some guys can end up in limbo, but obviously you didn't experience that. This was pretty bang, bang, bang for you. So, obviously you didn't have any of the things that maybe I was expecting or anticipating that you had. So you get to Stanford. You're on the recruiting trail pretty quick because you got to shore up a recruiting class or decide if you're going to, keep commitments and, all the stuff you have to do in the transition time. But one of the big things I think is, obviously you go to this, legendary program, extremely high academic program. How do you make sure that when you walk into a house, right? Because I'm sure by now you had the Sac State kind of, hey, we got this many enrolled and yada yada yada. We got these type of academic opportunities here. Now all of a sudden, you got to learn on the fly real quick about Stanford and then go get into some homes and tell moms that their kids are going to be okay with you. How did you go about, just learning about Stanford? Not necessarily the football part of it, but just the academic part, the majors and all that kind of stuff that you got to do to be a good recruiter.
Yeah. Once again, it's asking questions, so there was still, some previous coaches on staff that were still around a little bit.
Yeah.
There was, some people even in the support staff that were still around. And so asking those guys questions and, just trying to suck up as much as you could, as quickly as you could. And, there's obviously, without making this answer too long, there's a lot to learn. Still even stuff that we're learning,
Absolutely.
what I mean? Just on how to best go about that process.
Yeah.
But, I think, like I said, like everything, there's a lot of people with knowledge and experience on, a ton of different subjects, right? When you get into recruiting or into the side of things. And, I think it's trying to go in and ask those questions so you can best understand it. And that's really how it's gone.
Yeah. No doubt. Now, as we kind of come to a close here, I definitely want to ask, it's kind of one of those unique things, oftentimes if you're transitioning from, Sacramento State to maybe a Weber State or something like that, and you're coming in, you're bringing in your offensive style and all that kind of stuff. It's probably not this big, humongous change, but, some of these schools have just traditionally become kind of paralleled and tied to a type of offense or a type of defense. Georgia Southern triple option, the Academy's triple option, air raid at Texas Tech, all the kind of stuff where they're synonymous. And then you have Stanford, which is kind of one of those programs where traditionally they've had a lot of tight ends on the field, a lot of fullbacks, a lot of backs, and you guys at Sac State were traditionally 10 and 11 and all that kind of stuff. As you make that transition, what is that like for you to start? To tie this into kind of a recruiting question, start building that roster out like you guys wanted, and all those kind of things that you kind of have to juggle in order to get things moving in the direction that you guys want to get.
Yeah, I think Coach Taylor does a phenomenal job of basically adapting his scheme to the personnel that we have. And I think that's one of the things that makes him exceptional at what he does. And I think for us, we have a lot of schemes and concepts that we feel very good about, that we know we can run out of different personnel groups. Right. And so I think we always have an idea of kind of relatively how we'd like it to look, and so I think you recruit for that and recruit to that. But at the same time, we know, with the talent that we got here at Stanford already on the, in the program and on the team, we can do a lot of the things we want to do and just, kind of morph it to what our best 11 players are on offense specifically.
Absolutely.
And so we're obviously still going through that right now and trying to figure out, which guys we feel like can really help us. Yeah. But I think that's really what great coaches can do. And I think Coach Taylor does a great job kind of heading up our offense in that way of basically taking what our skill set and talent is. Even once, in 3 years when we've recruited some guys in the program, it's just taking what that talent and skill set is and, figuring out ways that we can do a lot of the concepts and schemes that we like and how to do it out of maybe different personnel group or different formation or whatnot. And so, yeah, to answer your question a little bit, it's, there definitely is a completely different office than what they've had here for the past decade or longer. And at the end of the day, I think there's some good players here in place that we can do a lot of the same things that we want to that we did at Sacramento State. Here with that personnel.
Yeah, no doubt, man. And I love that answer, man, because you kind of really talked about the role of a coach, being able to adapt to what you got. And, I always really just strongly feel like high school coaches are the best coaches in America because they can't. They literally can't recruit, in most schools. And so you have to make that constant adaptation. So that's awesome, man. I'm super excited about watching you guys play ball, man, and I really appreciate you coming on, sharing your story. Look forward to, like I said, meeting you in person here at some point in time as the dust continues to settle for you guys. Want to wish you best of luck as you move into this season, and hopefully can see you in Nashville in 2024. But before I let you go, I do want you to drop any social media that you got, any Twitter accounts that coaches can just hop on, follow you, just keep up with the rest of your journey.
Yeah, my Twitter is coach and then __ Osborne. I had to do 2 underscores because somebody else had all the other ones that I wanted. So got 2 of those things in there. And then Instagram, I think it's like Tyler _ Osborne and something like that. So
okay. Cool.
Yeah.
Well, we'll link to Twitter if they can find that, and they can get the IG. All right, man. Well, hey, I appreciate you once again, Coach. That was an awesome story, man. And like I said, best of luck to you guys as you continue to build and get rolling for the season. Okay.
I appreciate it.
Right,
Thank you for having me on.
No doubt.
All right.
CoachComm has been delivering tough headsets for tough teams for more than 31 years. It's why 97% of FBS teams and thousands of high schools across the country rely on CoachComm. Get the best for your team. Visit CoachComm.com for more info.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Inside the Headset, presented by CoachComm. If you'd like to learn more about this week's episode, head over to AFCA.com. There, you can access every episode and find corresponding show notes. Remember, you can catch every episode of Inside the Headset presented by CoachComm on wherever you get your podcasts, including Spotify, Apple, and YouTube. While you're there, we'd love for you to take a moment to rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast. Your feedback helps us improve and grow. Keep up with the latest news by following us on social media. Connect with us at Inside the Headset, and remember to tag us when you share your favorite episodes. For more updates on all things AFCA, be sure to follow the @WeAreAFCA social media accounts. If you're not a part of the AFCA community yet, visit AFCA.com to join thousands of NFL, college, and high school coaches nationwide and across the globe. Elevate your coaching game with an AFCA membership. You'll gain exclusive access to the annual AFCA convention, magazine, digital library, and AFCA Insider email. Stay up to date with the latest stories and news on the AFCA website. More than just a convention, the AFCA offers continuous education, guidance, networking, and more. Celebrate the past and shape the future with the AFCA. It's about fostering exceptional coaches who create outstanding teams and even better individuals. Invest in your skills and make a lasting impact today by engaging with the AFCA. Your journey starts here.